What's going on, guys? SeeJay here with another video, and today I want to do a deep dive into some analytics around what we can expect hopefully this month for potentially either new marquees or farmable marquees, as well as just some speculation into what we could see in the next couple of weeks, couple of months, just based off of averages that we've seen Heroes of Middle-earth so far give us over the last, 6 months since they started adding new characters since launch. Let's go ahead and dive into this. All right, guys. So I'm kind of a nerdy nerd when it comes to Excel and analytics and my day job. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is diving into sales and day supply and just a whole lot of fun, right? Living in the corporate America world. But I thought this one would be a fun one, just kind of taking a little bit of a speculation shot on what we can expect to happen over the next couple of weeks / couple of months, when we can maybe see a return of Elrond or Thorin based off of some data, which is very minimal data. So keep that with a grain of salt when it comes to the legendary perspective. But just taking the data that we have and kind of running with it, let's see sort of where things kind of end up, right? So I like doing this kind of stuff. Shout out to Veilshot. I love his master sheet. He's got a ton of great data on there that he generally updates pretty frequently. I've taken some of his stuff and sort of added it to personal sort of data tracking, added my own spin to some of the stuff. But I did want to shout him out because this is some of this kind of data is coming from him, and then I'm kind of just expanding on it. So if this is kind of stuff you guys like and want access to, I can make my own sort of master file with some of the things that I've added in on top of existing data that that is already out there, instead of just starting from scratch. Like, there's no reason to. I mean, if something's out there that's great, I'm going to use it and then maybe build upon it. But if that's something you guys want, I can make sort of like a shared document that people have access to if they want to kind of add it to their own personal arsenal of information that is, good to just have if you're trying to look at stuff. Like, one of the things I added that I thought was kind of nice is just light and shadow. You can also see kind of on my characters tab, I've added what tribe they're in, or what role they play, or which node they are. So you can see like L59 means light 5/9, right? And G is guild 1/5, S is shadow, right? Pretty basic. And just kind of where they're farmable, and just been adding all the characters kind of at it as like a tracker of my own 2 cents, just so I have, the data to kind of quickly glance at if I need to like run anything. And I'm just kind of curious, like, oh, how many light characters we have versus shadow, or how many characters are farmable in light and shadow campaign versus guild or versus the shop, etc., etc. But that's a bigger, that's kind of something else. So if we're looking at this and we kind of work left to right, these are all the characters that have been released into the game last year, right? Or into the game in totality since launch. So we've got the, the original event that happened back in January, June, Arwen, Elodin, and Elrond, which was the Elrond event. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember just kind of like watching some older content creators, I believe these were sort of like pseudo announced when the game came out. So like, people knew Elrond was coming. Again, I didn't start playing until I believe it was the Faramir, Boromir, Denethor sort of push. I think those are the first marquees that I was able to kind of get that, free 100 shards. So I completely missed the Haradrim run, which I'm still pretty salty about, because I did get Biffer. So Biffer we can unhighlight here. I did miss Tibeb and Bekaloo. Don't really care about Bekaloo being a guild farm, and he's already maxed on my account. But Tibeb, I would do anything for a return of Tibeb for 100 free shards. Please bring him back into the game. But I did miss, obviously, the fellowship run of Legolas and Gimli. Again, Gimli, I mean, he's not maxed out on my account, but he's a guild farm. So like, if I could get a free 100, that'd be great. Legolas, arena shop, I'm already like 1/3 of the way to getting 7-star. So I mean, a free 100 would be amazing, but most of the characters are not as relevant. I mean, Arwen and Elodin are the only 2 characters that we've seen a return on in the game since launch. So I don't know if Capital Games in like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, because I'm not a long-term player. I've only just started touching that game not even a week ago, so I don't really know how Capital Games works their just like their marquee events, like if they're kind of a one and done sort of system most of the time, with these sort of like pseudo one-offs because they fit the legendary event that is just helpful to get those extra elves in. So, perfect example here would be like Thorin came with Bomber and Bilbo. So like maybe Bomber and Bilbo make a return when Thorin comes back around, right? Because they were kind of released as like a trio. So I could see that happening because they did that with Arwen and Elrond, right? So like they might make a future return on a Thorin relaunch or re-release for his legendary event. But as for some of these other guys, like I'd expect they wouldn't make, based off what we've seen so far, a re-release Marquee event unless there's a reason to do it. So like an example here would be, I'd expect at some point this year we'd see like another Fellowship type run. Maybe we get like Aragorn added to the game, or like a Frodo V2, you know, like another version of Frodo in the game. And if that happened, then maybe that event would allow for like Legolas and Gimli to return, right? Like there could be some kind of big event for any of these factions if they did like a big legendary kind of release for those factions. So like Black Beast, Rekka, and Charu, right? Like maybe there's a big Nazgul legendary that comes out and then they get sort of like a re-release. So just speculation there. But from what we've seen so far, they haven't really done any re-releases besides Arwen and Elrond. So time will tell. Again, the game is really young, so we don't really have enough data to necessarily say when is what going to happen, right? But what we can see, based off what we do know, is how long between Marquee events and legendary events do we see another run, or just in general, like how often are things kind of happening, right? For Marquee events, how long is it from a Marquee character to a farmable somewhere in the game node? And then from a legendary event, how long until they make a reappearance, right? So those are kind of like the two big things I was trying to figure out here. So we can see on column E and F, the initial run and the run end date that I kind of plugged in here because I wanted to see when did they happen and then when did it end. So obviously 6-1 to 6-7, end date was 6-7. So if we're looking at that, my days farmable, just simple math, okay, farmable on 8/17 and it ended on 6/7, right? So that means 71 days after Arwen was done on her Marquee event, she became a farmable node. And then Elrond was 69 days later. 73, 66, 68, etc., etc. So if you tally up them all and average it, it's 70 days on average across, what do we have, 4 plus count 7, so 11 characters have been released and added somewhere into the game as farmable. And on average of those 11 characters, it's been 70 days that they become farmable. So with that kind of intel that we have, we can see Rumil and Orophin, which I've been kind of talking a lot about and other content creators talking a lot about because they're both really, really pretty good characters, especially Rumil. I want to start farming him. Well, when is he going to be farmable? Well, according to the 70 days, he should have been released last week. And normally they release some kind of in buckets. You know, you can kind of see here, like these two were released separately, but you know, 2 in September, 2 together in October, followed by the 1, and then kind of 2 in November, and then again, etc., etc., right? So I would assume we hear from CG early next week, and along with their patch note, I would expect we see Rumil and Orophin farmable probably next week. Because they're already going to be behind on both of those characters with their average timeline. Now, to be fair, we've had a character as late as 81 days from end of Marquee event to farmable. So it's not to completely say that, oh my God, you guys are, you know, you're past 70 days. Like what the hell is going on, right? Like if 1.3 was 70 and now we're on 1.12 as of today of recording the video, that puts them at what, 79 days? So yeah, I mean, if they don't release it until end of next week, like that is going to put Rumil and Orophin at kind of that higher average mark, right? Like 81 was the longest between release to farmable, and this is going to pass that because if we're at 79 today, which is Friday, and we don't expect to hear anything until probably Tuesday because of the holiday in the US on Monday, that's already 4 more days, 3 to 4 more days. So that puts you now at 82, 83. And I doubt they're going to announce and move them to a node on the exact same patch note announcement. So probably won't see them until maybe Wednesday or Thursday in game. But I would expect Rumil and Orophin will be farmable next week, which is exciting. Now, with that being said, we've had 11 characters move from Marquee to Farmable. And sadly, if you're looking at this, of where they end up in the world of Farmable, out of the 11 characters, so obviously excluding Elrond here in this highlight, only 4 have moved to a campaign farmable node. The first 2, Arwen and Eladin, were moved to Shadow and Light end game sort of farms, and then Denethor and Lord Balin were just actually done most recently back in December and moved to Shadow and Light farmable nodes. Every other time it's been a guild shop, it's been a challenge shop, it's been arena, etc, etc. They've been always moved somewhere else in the game. That, and if you hear my dog in the background, I apologize. It's about school time and people are getting off the bus, and I have a German Shepherd, so she's having her blast of barking. But the problem here is the last 2 releases were Shadow and Light campaigns. So it really kind of makes me think that we're not going to see either Rumil or Orophin probably added to the campaign node, which kind of sucks because I'm really hoping we can farm them. So I don't know where they're going to put them, but I really hope they don't put either one of those 2 characters in the challenge shop. But I guess we'll see where they end up. But based off history, 4 out of 11 has moved to a campaign farmable node, and the last 2 were moved to campaign farm. So it's not looking too good that they're going to just move the next 2 to campaign farmable as well. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then if we want to look just kind of sticking to the Marquee bucket, you can see if we kind of go past Rumil and Orophin, we start to get into the release back in November, which was the Dark Sorcery month, and we had Black Beast, Rekka, and Charu released, which was finally kind of some shadow characters, because you can see prior to those 3 in November, it was all light outside of the Haradrim duo release, so very light heavy in 2023. So hopefully we see more shadow going into 2024. But those characters technically are supposed to, based off 70 days, be released as well in January. But I would tend to think we might see them maybe pushed a week out further than that. So that would put the 3 of them, if they decided to release all 3 together, somewhere at the beginning of February. And then that sort of starts to roll into like this last batch we just got in December, which is going to be kind of getting us closer to that March window, which then we'll probably get back onto maybe that closer to 70-day timeline. The other thing that I was kind of surprised to see, and maybe this is why we've had lack of communication and why we haven't really had any marquees so far in January, is if we're looking at kind of the release cadence of marquee characters and the month, it looks like in June we had 3, right? I mean, I guess technically only 2, because this did roll into Elrond did roll into July. But even if we exclude Elrond, so you had 2 in June, which was right after the game launched, so that's relatively fair. Then you had looks like 2 in July. Then you had 3 in August. Then you had 3 in September. Then you had looks like 2 in October. So we're roughly 2 to 3 per month, right? But then in November we actually had 4 characters released. And then in December, we also had 4 characters released, which one of them being the legendary, so 3. But normally we had a cadence of 2 to 3. The last 2 months we were actually kind of spoiled, or not spoiled, depending on how you consider it, because of, cha-ching, cha-ching. But we had 3 to 4 characters for the last 2 months. So maybe because they had the higher marquee release of 7 characters plus a legendary in just a 2-month window, compared to normally, 2, maybe 3 in a month, leading to around that 4 to 5 per 2 months versus what we had, which was 7 to 8. Maybe that is kind of covering their January lack of releases for marquees. Now, I don't think that means January will be a completely dead month. I do expect that next week we'll have some kind of marquee announced. I certainly hope we'll have some kind of marquee announced, but maybe it's a month where we only have 1 or 2 characters versus the standard kind of closer to 3 per month. So be interesting to see again what we hear from them next week. Kind of looking forward to it. So yeah, definitely interesting stuff. And then if we just quickly look at kind of the similar concept here for legendaries, again, we only had Elrond make 1 return, so it's a little bit harder to use analytics and really say, wow, it took X amount of days for Elrond to return, so that's the average, because we only had 1. So it's not really great data to suggest when we'd see a return. But if we look at what did happen, he came out and ended on 7-3 and then came back and ended on 11-8. So if we look at that, it's exactly 128 days. So without deviating anything, just using strictly 11.8 minus 7.3, that gave us 128. So if I do the last run of Elrond plus 128, that means sometime in mid-ish March, we could see a return of Elrond. So just kind of food for thought. If it's someone that you're still looking to farm, whether it be 5 or 7 stars, we could potentially see him in the next 2 months. So we'll probably hear something, if that is true, sometime in February. So a month and a half from now, they might make an announcement about a return of Elrond. And then if it was about the same time window, that 128 days, then shortly after Elrond's event ended, we would see some announcements in return of Thorin in April. So we'll see if that holds true, if 128 is the number that ends up being kind of the average, but that'll help once Elrond and Thorin come back, because then we can kind of use more data to say, okay, well, he came back in April, so that's not 128, that was 150 days later, so now it's closer to like 140 on average, and then Thorin, etc. Right? We'll have more data to be able to really understand the release cadence of some of these legendaries. Now, because it's mid-March and late April for those 2 legendaries, that does leave a little bit of opportunity for potentially something to be announced and released before either one of those 2 make a comeback, especially if the Elrond maybe pushed out to late March, early April, and then Thorin made a late April, early May return. So that's kind of exciting, because maybe we'll get some kind of announcement sooner than later for a 3rd legendary versus waiting until March and April for their return and then not anything until potentially May or June of this year before the 3rd legendary is added into the game. So anyways, I thought this would be kind of a fun video to make, and a little bit of analysis diving into just kind of speculation and what we can expect to see over the next couple of weeks, couple of months, see if any of this holds true, or if it's completely doesn't even hold any value, right? Like, we'll have to wait and see, but hopefully it helps kind of you guys on what to expect, what to see, what to start thinking about for farming, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.